Hi all, I'd like to show you another brilliant move from the Norway Chess Tournament 2014. In round 3, Giri was playing Vladimir Kramnik. Now Kramnik played this move bishop f5 here, and this does support a battery like this towards the left. Interesting, actually, the engine's suggestion is supporting another battery immediately with queen f7. The battery here to the right supports actually rook d1, but let's go back to that in a moment. After rook d7, queen f1, this bishop f5, so it supports this queen e6 battery. And now after rook c2 was played, the move queen e6 doesn't seem to have such a great effect, surely, because white is protecting h3 with his own defensive battery here. Nevertheless, this next move is actually extremely powerful. Queen e6 is extremely powerful, and it's the behind the scenes implication of this which is amazing, of this battery, which you might think is protected. But let's see, in the game queen e2 was played. You might think that's quite mysterious, giving up h3. So let's see what happens behind the scenes here to cause queen e2 to be played. Well, if white plays rook c3, which you might think would also parry the invasory queen b3, can you see what brilliant move behind the scenes that black has in this position? If I give you 10 seconds to pause the video now, what would Vladimir Kramnik have played in this position? Okay, his battery does have a purpose. Bishop takes h3. The idea here, after bishop takes h3, can you see in this position? 200 points if you can get the right move. Do you need 5 more seconds to pause the video? Okay, not rook d1. This is only equal if you said rook d1. It's clever as well. White doesn't want to take here because the queen takes h3, but white's okay after bishop takes, just about. Check. Because there's an escape here, and this is actually given as equal by engines. No, in this position, much better than rook d1 is queen takes. And now, after queen takes, check. Now if king g1, there's rook g1 mate, so white will be forced to play queen f1 returning the queen. Rook takes, king g2, check, king h3, and the crushing point here, can you spot it, what black could play here? If I gave you 10 seconds in this position to pause the video. Okay, black has g5, threatening g4, and white can't do anything about it. It's a forced mate in 3. White can play a check, and now the engine's suggesting the best move is giving up the rook to, these are the engine moves, classic engine to survive as long as possible. This is g4. If g4 just hg again, it's mate. Black is threatening g4 mate. The knight neatly covers the h4 square. So a remarkable conception, and you can see why Vladimir Kramnik chose this battery towards the left with bishop f5. It turns out the engine move is actually quite clever as well. It turns out actually that here white technically is doing okay with queen e2, just for those interested in this, because here, for example, queen e6 can actually be parried with bishop takes, with white doing very well in this position. White does very well. So actually on queen e2, this would be the strongest move for white. It actually maintains inequality, and ridiculously, well, the engine doesn't care about the history of the game. The engine would suggest putting the bishop back here, basically to support this queen f7 idea for the battery over here, which it considers was actually technically the more important one to start off with. So queen f7, although technically was the right move, it is, let's see, if white plays queen e2 here now, this is actually quite crushing because of rook d1. White would actually be forced to give up the exchange. So against this one, queen e2 is no good here, but white, the best move for white, it's a difficult position actually after this queen f7, very, very difficult for white. The best move, one of the best moves is shown, is bishop takes f3. So queen takes, king h2, rook d1. You can see white's on the defensive, and here black would just about be better. Well, only move to be better. Bishop takes h3. Incredible stuff. So if king takes, there's rook h1 mating. White's best would be taking here off the takes. Bishop b2. And black is a little bit better. But in the game, okay, so that's what the engine thinks. The battery over here should have been used. In the game continuation, the battery over here towards the left is very, very powerful. And queen e2, bishop takes h3 is really strong here, and it wasn't actually played by Vladimir. This is actually strong. In the game, g6 was played here, but this bishop takes h3 is surprisingly strong because white is actually weak on a lot of the dark squares, including d1. So for example, bishop takes, e takes, queen takes, there's bishop g4 supporting rook d1, and the check doesn't do anything because of bishop f5. So this would be pretty bad. Queen here, stronger than taking here. Sorry, the queen is attacked anyway. The strongest move for black in this position is to play the check, to actually take the queen off. And this position here is very, very good for white, because if the rook leaves the protection of the e4 square, then bishop e4 threatens mate. For example, rook c3, bishop e4 is a forced mate in 3 actually. That's how severe this is. White could only spectate here as his forced mate in 3 is forced on him. g4, h4 cutting off g3. So there's a remarkable amount of stuff which went on behind the scenes of this game for just the simple move queen e6, which also threatened, you know, queen b3. So in the game we saw queen e2, g6, rook c4, and after bishop takes h3, now this is really bad for white. White resigns here. The threat includes now queen takes c4 to get to rook d1 check to be played. Now if rook c2, then this is crushing. Bishop takes, and you can see white is weak on light squares like h3. Knight g5 is, again, it's absolutely a forced mate indicated in 8 here. Forced mate in 8. Absolutely crushing stuff behind the scenes. Remarkable tactical richness to this whole position. Kramnik, getting this position, you know, had played very, very dynamically in the opening. If we go back to the opening, what he had done is actually accept double pawns here. He'd allowed this structure, which looks kind of wretched in some respects, you might argue, but the incredible dynamism this creates for getting an attack later, especially after e3. You can see white's being pressed on these light squares, that it's fascinating. It doesn't matter about the queenside pawn being lost there. really, in practical terms, because white is under pressure on the light squares, and these ones in particular under such scrutiny. But it's fascinating later how getting rid of this pawn to vacate that e6 square was very important for battery options once that e6 square was vacated. Now this queen e6 is a menacing threat. The other aspect, if white played h4, then queen b3 is actually quite annoying. Very annoying. It just starts to win pawns or get to d1. It's not very nice at all. So this way of getting into the position via d1 was incredibly dangerous. What does white actually do here? If queen e2, then again this is dangerous. Bishop g4, even bishop g4, and it's unbelievable scrutiny on all the light squares. It's been set up with enterprising play by Kramnik earlier in the game. It's just fascinating, the behind the scenes stuff, which I'm not entirely sure most of the general public really appreciate. You know, the strength of these seemingly quiet moves, but the tactics behind it are just phenomenal, causing, you know, what looks to be a strange move, queen e2, but given the queen sack was threatened, I hope you can understand now that white was concerned about this d1 square, so playing queen e2 to try and parry that. Okay, very complex stuff. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.